They said February 14th would be okay for approval. So that will come back February 14th. Any other amendments to the agenda? Yes.
We have time to ask a few questions about the blackberry jam removal before you table it off.
Sure.
Okay, when do you want that done?
Well, we leave it on the agenda and table it under mayor's report.
Can you do that?
Yeah,
Ask a few more
fine.
questions.
That's fine. So, and there are no amendments to the agenda. Okay. We do have one presentation, and sometimes as mayor, I get to do things that are very special once in a while, and tonight happens to be one of those nights. So we do have a certificate of recognition for Santa Claus. Santa, would you please come forward? As everyone knows, this is the only one true Santa that comes to Yorkville for holiday holiday and good stars. So
It was a great year this year.
it was. We appreciate all you do, Santa.
And every year it's getting better and better. Believe me, it's a pleasure to come out here. It really is.
I would like to present this to you. You remember taking that picture with me?
Yes, I do.
So this is from the Mayor and City Council of the United City of Yorkville. We present this certificate to Art Townsend Santa Claus in recognition for your personal contributions to the children of Yorkville. Your hours of service have enriched our lives and warmed our hearts. There are many Santa's helpers, but it's nice to know that Santa himself takes time to come to see the children of Yorkville. Presented this 24th day of January, 2012. I know you've been doing this a long time, almost 50 years, is it?
Almost 50.
And I know you make visits to hospitals and orphanages and children's homes. And you want to tell us a little bit how you got started?
Well, actually, I was in high school. I was 16. And a friend of mine had a little lease in the home for special kids up on Irving Park Road. And a bunch of us got together and said, let's go talk to the kids. And they said, we need a Santa Claus. And my buddy says, you're jolly, you like kids, you get along with everybody. So we rented a $9 suit. I still have it in my cabinet, in my closet at home. It's a reminder of when I started. And when I was younger, we went to see Santa Claus downtown. And my father said to me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, I want his job. I want him because he makes kids happy. I set out a goal to raise money for kids. Excuse me. My goal was, if I made one kid happy, I accomplished what I set out to do. In over 48 years doing this, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of thousands of kids. I was just at a school a couple weeks ago. It's called Arrow School in Burbank for special need children. And I was invited there, and I spent 3.5 hours with all the kids. And one young man named Kevin was 16 years old. I put my arm around him. I said, Kevin, we're going to Hollywood. You're going to replace Brad Pitt, and I'm going to be your booking agent. And he looked up at me and hugged me, and he said, Santa Claus. 2 weeks later, I went back there, and they made a presentation to me of a plaque. First time I ever did it. I've gotten plaques before from Yorkville. And what I set out to do when people ask me, I said, please make a donation to some charity. I have a list of charities that I deal with, and I said, if you would make a donation to a charity, I am not like, I tell people, I'm not a mall Santa Claus. I look at myself as being a real thing because, as you know, Mayor, when I look at the kids, and a couple years ago we did this, and it was real cold out there, and we had tents set up, and I kept apologizing to the people that you had to wait in line. But I said, I need to talk to your children, see how well they're doing in school, their helping chores around the house, things like that. Mall Santa Claus doesn't do that because they're on a time span. I've done this in the past. So my thing was, no malls, and I'm going to go out and reach as many kids as I can. And over the years, I've been very, very fortunate to continue doing what I do. And I hope I've got at least another 30 years left to do this. But I'll tell you, meeting the mayor for the first time, and Scott had called me out, we met, and he said, we want to do this thing again. I said, okay, fine, I'll be there, just let me know when you want it done. And I hope we have a lot more years that I can come out here and talk to the kids like Evelyn and all of them. Evelyn, I surprised her because when she came to the program, I had a Christmas list, and she was shocked. But I will tell you this, and I tell all the parents this. When you go home at night, you hug your kids. Tell them how much you love them. Tell them how much joy they bring into your life. And I tell the kids, hug your mom and dad. Because let them know how much you love them, how much you appreciate what they've done. Because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And I've seen kids, and I do Carter Bernadine, Ronald McDonald House, McNeil Hospital, Lorraine. This school I went to 2 weeks ago, it was a real tearjerker for me of all the years I've done this. So what I ask the parents is just appreciate your kids. Be with your kids. Spend the time with your kids. I'm a single parent. I raised my son for 23 years. That's my niece standing right back there. She'll attest to that. I've always felt that you need to be with your children. You need to know what's going on. Hug them every chance you get. And that was my goal 48 years ago. And if God grants me 30 more years, I'll be a happy camper and stuff. But I want to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, because this means a lot to me. I have the other plaque, and I have the two big pictures that they made. They took the front page of the newspaper, and they put them in a beautiful frame, and I have them hanging in my living room at the North Pole. And every year that I've done this, every child that's given me a Christmas list or a picture, I have saved over 48 years. I have never thrown anything out. I have boxes with every year that I've done this, and there are years I take out a bunch of stuff and I'll line my whole one wall with all the pictures. But my goal was to make kids happy, and if I make one kid happy, then I've set out and accomplished what I did to do. But from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank all of you for this, because I'll tell you what, Yorkville, I'll tell you what, honestly, if I was to move from the North Pole, I would move to Yorkville. I love it out here. This is a phenomenal community. You got a lot of great people. I was blessed to meet the new mayor, Scott, and a lot of people from this township. So if I ever decide to move, I would move out here in Yorkville. So maybe we could set up a North Pole house out here. But again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving me this beautiful plaque. Thank you. Thank you.
Great words from Santa. If you decide to build that house, we're going to get you a $10,000 rebate. Next, we have citizen comments. Do we have any citizens who would like to comment on that?
Mr. Mayor, I have the CBA would like me to speak now. Or let me speak during the,
That was probably better.
okay.
This is for the ZBA.
Yes.
Item.
My name is Mike Skinner, CBA. Several years ago, CBA decided that when we had a unanimous decision denying a variance, that we would send someone to the council to explain why we denied it, and that's why we received it. I spoke to some of you at YABC several weeks ago. It was tabled, non-received. As you know, ZBA is given guidelines that we have to follow copies of this, and this was one of the things that was brought forward in this ZBA variance request. We denied this for several reasons. Most importantly was that there were 3 people there in protest of changing this piece of property from single family to multifamily, R2D. Plus there was a letter sent in by the Pate family, they couldn't be there. You may have this in your packet, I don't know. So we have to take that into consideration. Also, we take into consideration the impact on the surrounding areas. And one of the most important criteria that we looked at is that R2 zoning requirements, R2 single family, minimum lot size is 12,000 square feet. This lot size is 9,000 square feet less than that. In other words, 60% less. So even in a single family lot, this lot is too small. The lot width for R2D is 100 foot width. This is right now at 70 square feet, which is 10 feet less than a single family lot. So even now, the home itself as it is not compliant. And he wants to make this the density for R2D is 4.8 dwellings per unit acre, per square acre is required. He is 200% less than what's required. So everything about the lot as a single family is too small for a single family. And what he's asking is for is 200% less density, 30% less in the lot width, and 60% in the lot size for R2D, duplex lot. All that considered, it was way too much for us to even think about even approving. Coupled with the fact that the people in the area don't want it, and our duplex is there. And we're extremely bothered by the fact that the Planning Commission approved this spot zoning. The zoning ordinances were adopted in Yorkville over the years, and they have evolved. Yes, at one time, spot zoning was accepted in the city of Yorkville. Things change. We progress forward. Progressing forward means we try to keep areas the way they are. We don't want to keep changing them in spot zoning. The south side of Yorkville has a lot of spot zoning. As an example, where I live in duplex, and right across the street from me is a man who is having some difficult times. And he commented to me in the middle of this that he has an outside entrance into his house. I could turn this into a duplex. So I can't. As long as I live across the street, I have to do that. Because it's spot zoning. It's a single family home now. If you were to approve this, we've been told many times at ZBA that we cannot set precedents. I think in a case like this, you would set precedents if you approve this variance to allow a duplex to be built on a non-compliant lot for single family, let alone it's not even half what it should be for a duplex. So all those things considered, I think that city council should look at this as moving backwards. In a lot of ways, this should be looked at as not a duplex, but more of as our council looked at it as not a duplex, but a two-flat. The old style two-flat. That's moving backwards. Yorkville has to progress forward. We have to eliminate all these different types of housing wherever. Yes, it is hard to do the economy right now. I agree with that. I don't believe me, I know how hard it is. But in the same token, we have to think about the future of Yorkville. And that's what the ZBA does. Everything that we look at and approve, we look at the future of Yorkville. Signs happen to be a particular thing. I think signs should be small. I think the town should not look like the city. Our town should look small and comfortable. That's why I've always been for smaller signs. And I think by approving something like this, you're going backwards where we have to go forwards and say, let's look at what could happen later on. One of the arguments was brought up by Planning Commission. Mr. Prohaska stated that we're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of what's out there. You're right. I am afraid of what's going to happen if we allow this. Every single family home then that's close to a duplex can say, make it a duplex. South side of Yorkville is the older part of town, and it has to be looked at. There are some areas on Adrian Street, off the State Street, where there are duplexes that are mixed. Around City Park, we have duplexes that were built when the old Baptist church burned down many years ago. Should the rest of those houses be allowed to be split up into duplexes? No, absolutely not. So we have to look at the future, and I think by approving this, you would be looking at the past and not the future. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
Well, I haven't been here to speak in quite a while. Haven't had really anything to complain about since the new council took office. Actually, you all have done a pretty good job watching out for the taxpayers, and I thank you for that. Please indulge me in remembering a dear old friend, but the end of my comments is really where the water goes between the rocks in some hard places. Tonight I have a concern that I need to air. It's about a dear friend I have known since childhood. Like any friend, you get concerned when their health is being questioned. We've all lost someone close to us at some time in our past. It's hard to say goodbye. My friend has had a long and wonderful life. I've read the reports on her health. She isn't perfect, but then I have to ask who is. After all, she's over 178 years old. I once wrote a column in the Beacon News about my dear friend. Here's an excerpt from the column. Rickety-rackety bridges. How many can remember the old metal bridge over the Blackberry Creek, or the old 5-mile bridge across the Fox River? I can still hear those boards making that clickety-clackety sound as Dad drove the car over the wood planks on that bridge. I swore the car was going to fall through the water to the water below every time we crossed it. As I remember, Dad never helped the situation much. He usually warned us before we got there by asking out loud, I wonder if this bridge can hold all this weight. It always did, and I guess we learned a lesson that just because things are old-looking doesn't mean they aren't still strong and dependable. My Blackberry Dam is a treasure. She was a fishing hole. She was a diving port. She was a challenge by a buddy to see if the young boy was brave enough to walk across her with water lapping at his ankles. She held back the water to make the mill pond many young kids used as their own hockey rink. She was the source of my very first 3-pound smallmouth bass. She was the absolute stopper for alligator gar back in the 1960s as they tried to swim upstream to feed on our prized game fish, and local fishermen shot the gar with their bow and arrows before they could do serious damage. The Blackberry Dam is the first mill dam built in Kendall County. It was built by John Schneider in 1834. The dam and mill were renovated in approximately 1855 by Manville Lane. Both owners operated grist mills at the site. This is a part of Old Bristol and today's Yorkville's history. I have stood up for her when others tried to tear her down. I was glad when they replaced the old metal span bridge with a new current bridge. The new bridge hid her from view. Everyone forgot about her. I like that. She was my secret spot. I would sit with my legs dangling over the side and listen to the sound of the water pounding on the rocks below. I even have pictures with a couple of my grandkids overlooking her beauty. She has been here since Andrew Jackson was only our 7th president. A mere 68 years after our country was founded. Our Blackberry Creek Dam has been our legacy for over 178 years. I will miss her when she's gone. I wanted to take this little time to give her some well-deserved honor tonight. I wanted her to know that not everyone has forgotten her in her old age. Some of us still love her and will have pictures and memories to talk about for many years to come. But I also wanted to make a comment about how I was treated in a local media called Patch, as it pertains to the story. I commented on Patch about the removal of that dam. My comments were about the cost of removing, not about whether she needed to be removed or not, but the cost. Here are just a couple of the retaliatory comments allowed to be printed. By Yorkville. I really don't care one way or another about the dam until now. Now that I know Mark Johnson wants to save it, I hope it gets torn down. We need to get rid of a lot of old garbage in this town. Another comment from Todd Miller. Yorkville. Many of us have strong opinions and passions. Mark and I don't always see eye to eye. We don't always agree. Lately, never agree. But I can tell you this, in his own way, he cares too about Yorkville. Just like you and I do. We're not here to attack individuals. And then the one that addressed it the most to me was the editor of the Patch, who came in after Todd's comment and said, Todd, is that really you? Or has Mark hacked your Patch account? I kid. Yorkvillian came back with a Blackberry Creek Dam has about as much value to Yorkville, Kendall County, and the state of Illinois as an 8-track tape deck. Devoting resources to investigate keeping it would be a classic example of all that is hypocritical and backwards here. Instead, let's devote what limited resources we have to investigate the value or necessity of an obsolete old dam. If you feel the need to enshrine it in its historic value, take a picture. It is the last comment. I'll finish up my comments tonight. First, about the info supplied by the city in their packets. The info is incomplete. After searching different dates, different committee meetings, and city council meetings, I was left without comprehensive information as to the final cost of the dam removal. I saw DNR's estimates for 2007 to be $1.5 million. I saw another note on 117 of 12 stating the IDNR has allocated $2 million reserved for this project. I also noted that this dam removal will be done in 2 phases. Phase 1 is doing some preliminary work diverting the water upstream by building berms. That cost was estimated at $200,000. I quote from a Part A special conditions. Phase 2 will include the work necessary to restore approximately 1,200 feet of Blackberry Creek channel upstream of the dam and the removal of the dam. I guess I was wrong to assume the dam had to be removed in order to rebuild the bridge. It doesn't. And it isn't going to be. I also see how the IDNR puts everything back onto the city of Yorkville and the Yorkville-Bristol Sanitary District to complete the job. If the funding dries up or gets diverted by the state legislature or by our governor. Again, I quote Lauren A. Wobig, project manager, IDNR Water Resources, from the website. By design, the actual removal of the dam is one of the very last, made capital last, activities of the project, such that if by some unforeseen reason the IDNR no longer had project dollars available, the screening system would basically revert back to pre-project conditions without need for the city to be forced to complete the work. However, the YBSD would be forced to address dam safety stability or removal of the dam. I wonder if they know that. Even in the Parks and Rec minutes, there was indecision. March 27, 2008, Park Board meeting minutes, Laura Tate reported she spoke with USAC Army Corps. She said she spoke with Joe Jordan and asked him if there were any watershed reports. Joe said there were no agreements within the courts if the dam should be removed at all. They are still in the process of deciding if it should be removed or partially removed, or if they should put in a fish ladder. They're still weighing all the options and have been working on this for 8 years. Mr. Jordan said he wanted to have a public meeting to get the public's input, which they've never done. So my final comment really to this council is, I don't want to stand in the way of the removal of that dam. I love the dam. I think it's a wonderful thing, and it's been there for this many years. Probably going to be here a lot longer than any of us sitting in this room. But if it's a danger to the new bridge, if it's a problem, it should be removed. I question the need for spending $2 million. And if I know the government the way I think I know the government, that $2 million is probably going to be $3 million or more. And comments about that I heard, I think, a couple meetings ago, that maybe we can put in another canoe chute, to me is ridiculous to be talking about. If they have to take the dam out because of the bridge, then go ahead and do it and try and do it in an efficient manner. But don't go spending $2 million or $3 million of taxpayers' money on something that doesn't really need to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Any other citizen comment? Okay, moving on. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Should I speak now?
You're the petitioner. You can speak when we get to that part of the agenda. Any other citizen comments before we move on? Okay. Now I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Colosimo.
Aye.
Wilczewski. Aye. Spears. Aye. Funkhauser.
Aye.
Gilson.
Aye.
Teeling. Aye. Hutt.
Next, motion to approve the appointment of Peter Ramos as the zoning code official. So moved.
Second.
Okay, as the whole city council knows, and probably not the media and audience, but our past code official, Mark, has taken a job back in Texas. Pete Rado started with us last Tuesday, and rather than go out and interview new candidates, we went to the next person on the list of interviews, people that we did interview, and luckily Pete was still available. So it was a very, very tough choice between Pete and Mark when we did the original interviews, so we're grateful that he was still available. Pete is a licensed plumber, so we will not have to outsource plumbing inspections anymore. The rest of the information is in the packet. Do we have any questions or comments on this?
I just want to see, after reading his resume and all his certification and education, he is well qualified, and I think he's going to do an excellent job for Yorkville. And I wish he was around today when the water heaters started leaking. And I had to have a new relief valve put on there, whatever that is. But I'd like to welcome him to Yorkville.
Any other comments or questions? And hopefully, we're going to find a little bit of money in the budget so Pete can get his plan review certification, so we can do all the plan reviews in-house. So, all right, Pete, welcome on board. Roll call, please.
Cott.
Aye.
Spears. Aye. Velocino.
Aye.
Bunkhauser.
Aye.
Milczynski.
Aye.
Teeling. Gilson.
Aye.
Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement among the State of Illinois Department of Natural Resources, the United City of Yorkville, and the Yorkville Bristol Sanitary District for the Blackberry Creek Dam Removal and Restoration Project, and authorize the mayor and the city clerk to execute.
Second.
Damon, thank you. Comments or questions on this? A little background, this was in Public Works Committee. There was some language that Mr. Johnson mentioned about the city having to take over the project as the state decided there wasn't enough funding available. It did not come out of committee. We went back to the state IDNR and asked them to remove that language. They claimed that it was never their intent to have that language in there, so they did remove it. But they sent us a new agreement, but it did not go through our legal department. So we kind of asked them, do you want us to approve this agreement as is, or wait till legal looks at it? And they said, yeah, we can wait till February 14th. So we will ask to table this, but if we can answer some of Mr. Johnson's questions or Councilor's questions, throw it out there.
I have a couple of questions. That maybe can be answered in the interim or come back to us. On page 4, and some of this falls actually into some of the things Mark mentioned about the need for completion. It starts on page 3. It says natural resources funding obligation will terminate upon completion of the project, and so on and so forth. If you read through that paragraph, it goes on to say, in its sole discretion as directed by the Office of the Governor, a reduction is necessary or advisable upon actual or projected budgetary considerations, or if funds needed are insufficient for any reason. Natural resources will have no obligation to implement or complete the project without the necessary appropriation, reappropriation, and availability of state funds. City and district will be notified in writing of the failure of the appropriation or reduction or decrease. The question I had, who then, after we go forward and we spend dollars here, and dollars are spent both on the state level and the IDNR level, taxpayers' money, who then completes the dam if they decide not to complete it?
Anybody that wanted to or no one. That was the clarification that was provided at the meeting. As written, the way we interpreted it, the way that I thought the IDNR had interpreted it between us, was that we would be responsible, us or MSD, to complete it if it stopped in the street. And basically this clarification, and I don't believe it's changed in the legal review that's already occurred, is that the project can be abandoned in projects with absolutely no responsibility from anyone actually completed. What we've been told, and maybe the engineers can comment on this, but that project stoppage, even in the middle, wouldn't impact flooding, wouldn't impact the stability of the dam and the bridge. It would be left in basically the same or similar situation, condition that it is now.
And the reason I ask that is I struggle over and over and over again about wasting taxpayers' dollars. And if we go forward spending, let's say $2 million, or let's say 1.5, whatever it would be, a taxpayer's dollars at the state level, and we're going to have money in this too, for maintenance and other things as well. If we're going to go forward with that and approve an agreement, shouldn't there be somebody on the hook to complete it? I mean, and not us. I mean, we shouldn't be on the hook.
Not necessarily. It would be ideal, obviously, but I don't remember every section of the dam bypass construction agreement. But I don't believe the completion of that was ever guaranteed. And I think it was even actually contemplated
why then don't they put it under priority to make sure someone completes it if we go forward wasting our money? And I'm not saying it's a waste. I'm saying if they go forward spending our taxpayers' dollars, shouldn't they also guarantee to complete it? Or somebody besides us? I mean, that's just a thought to think about. I have just a few more, if you don't mind. On page 5, natural resources will make periodic inspections subsequent to completion of the project to ensure that adequate maintenance as defined in Article C, paragraph 6 is being performed on the project. Should natural resources determine that a maintenance problem exists, a joint inspection will be scheduled and made by the city and natural resources. Failure of the city to properly maintain the project as defined herein and as indicated by a written report of such inspection will put natural resources upon 30 days notice, so on, et cetera, et cetera. What happens if that joint inspection, natural resources decides that something has to be fixed and the city says it doesn't? What happens if there's a disagreement there? What's the precedent?
A litigation or negotiation or else, I suppose.
The other couple questions I have are page 6, item 5. The city will be responsible for all utility alterations or relocation for all fence removal and/or replacement required as a result of project construction, including the utility and fence-related work shown on the plans. Isn't there a fence there that has to be removed, and isn't it the YPSD's fence or no?
No, that's on the fence is on the south side of the road, and this project is all on the north side.
Is
There
there
should
any-
not, it may be with the bridge project, but not with this project.
Okay, so it's not related to the dam.
No,
Is there any utilities that have to be moved or altered?
not to my knowledge. There's only one set of poles on the north side of the road at that spot, and I believe they're cable TV. And hopefully they'll be removed in the bridge project.
Okay. Under number 6, it says the city without cost of natural resources will assume all responsibility for the operation, maintenance, and rehabilitation of the project after construction completion to ensure that it will serve the intended purpose. Anybody have any idea how much that's going to cost us?
I don't know that we've put a dollar figure to it yet. Is anybody scared to throw together a guess?
Excuse me, once the dam's removed, it will be essentially a natural creek. So there might be some brush removal from time to time that, from a cost perspective, it would be hard to quantify at this point. But, you know, for instance, Blackberry Creek is in the city's jurisdiction. I'm not sure what type of maintenance costs are associated with that. But I don't imagine that it's much.
And here's why I asked that, Jeff. It goes on further in that paragraph to say project maintenance will include, but not limited to, keeping the site clear of trash, debris, and other matter that may tend to impede the proper free flow of water. Measures another matter that measures will also be taken as required to maintain channel bank stability measures, including grade control weirs, and to control any substantial erosion problems. So that's all our responsibility?
Based on this agreement, it would be.
That might be costly. We have to fix erosion problems, and what are and the weirs? What are they referring to there?
Presume they have not actually given us the final plans yet. We will be reviewing them when they give it to us, and certainly we'll keep in mind any maintenance responsibilities when we are reviewing those. The weirs typically are set up to spread out the water a little more to control that, such that it doesn't channelize into a higher velocity section, which, you know, we would again look at the plans to make sure that it's set up for the city's long-term interests.
To be like a fixed concrete point
Yeah.
in the actual
Typically.
floodway or streamway.
So let's say they decide that they want weirs. At some point, we're held liable for those weirs? And that's how it's stated here, and that's why I'm questioning, along with the cost of bank stability and erosion and everything else that goes into what it's going to cost us on our end. Shouldn't we know that? You know what I mean? Before you agree to terms like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's intended that way so that once the state backs away from the project, that it's clear that they are basically responsible for the ongoing maintenance of it. So we wouldn't come back to them and say, well, you installed this from the get-go, please do it again, or we can please fix it. So I mean, the entire agreement is structured that way. State, we project, they're going to complete it, and then they don't want any jurisdiction over it after that, which, is kind of the role that we would take anyway, even if nothing gets done. It's still within our jurisdiction geographically. We don't necessarily own the stream or own property around it, but, we're usually managing jurisdiction over both sides.
Did we do that with the previous dam? Do we control bank stability? Do we have any weir responsibility? Do we have any erosion or trash or brush removal, any responsibility like this?
No, there are no weirs in there now. This would be the maintained one, and the erosion control they're talking is not, from what I remember talking with Mr. Wilson, was that there was going to be 2-to-1 slopes on each side of the bank that are going to be replanted. And it's just going to be maintained those to make sure those plants are viable and repopulate, so there is no erosion. It's a very low maintenance from what I understand in this area.
Do we do any stability or maintenance with the previous dam? Do you know?
No, we do not.
No, and I would say up until 6 months ago, I think the actual ownership of the dam was starting to get under discussion. So not only was there no discussion of maintenance responsibility, it really nothing to do with ownership either. So we've come a long way.
I have one more question. The eligibility for the national flood insurance and the letter says the city will, without cost of natural resources, seek a letter of map revision, LMOR, from the Federal Emergency from FEMA to update the city flood insurance study and associated maps to reflect a 100-year flood profile changes resulting from completion of the project. Did we do that with the previous dam? Who had all that information?
Good question. I don't remember the last time I saw the FEMA maps across my desk.
I think it's since it's changed. Since something has changed prior to this, there wouldn't have to be a letter of map revision.
So it'd be like an amendment process.
Yes, that's my understanding. Is that correct, Jeff? You filed that?
Yes. I mean, once it's obviously changing the profile of the creek, and therefore the floodplain elevations would change. And based on this agreement, it states that it's the city's responsibility to make the appropriate filing with the FEMA.
Right. So I mean, that's something we're going to have to seek at cost to us. But I'm just curious, was there any records previous? I mean, did anybody have to do that previous? Sure. It seems like we're getting a lot of responsibility that's piled up on us.
There's current maps now, and since it hasn't been changed before, it's never had to be revised.
They send out FEMA maps every 4 or 5 years, I believe.
Well, it depends. Yes. Some can be as much as 20 years old, but it just depends on when they study the creeks, and Blackberry Creek is relatively, well, actually it's not in that section. It's kind of old. So there are existing floodplains in Blackberry Creek, just like there is on the Fox River, and unless there's major changes to the creek, there will be really no reason to change those floodplain maps. So there's an active map. Now, once the dam's removed, as you can imagine, the water levels are going to drop through that section, and it's going to have a different hydraulic profile. For that reason, again, the agreement is stating that it would be the city's responsibility to file with FEMA. Now, through the design process, I'm presuming that they will have all the data that's needed to put with the application for the letter of map revision, such that the submittal to FEMA to get the map changed based on the condition that it will be after the dam would not take that much of an effort.
And is there any cost to this new valve? I mean, it talks about cost, and I'm just wondering, what is there any cost? Do we have to see that information?
Well, I mean, that would be something that certainly the city's engineering department, aka us, would help with. And I would think based on the level of work, if the data is there from the design process, that's something that would fit into our normal function. If there's significant amount of work outside of what they've done to complete that application, then that would be something that we'd have to look at a little closer.
I think the last time we performed the map amendment would have been upon the completion of the large pond stuff outside of Bristol Bay. The name is escaping me.
Sure, for the Raymond
Regional Stormwater Detention Basin. So I believe when we completed the study for the Ochoa project, we went through either before or after that, I don't recall, for a map review.
Before we had done some work with IDNR to essentially establish the flows through there and establish the floodway. In this instance, it would be not only from a state
The other thing is, and I just back to Mr. Johnson's question, is what is any figure in all together cost of what it's going to cost the city for involvement in this project?
If we get it under the nationwide permit, there's no cost for that. That would usually be $10,000 when it's contemplated in the agreement. They don't start, that we'd be on the hook for that. I think we had estimated that it'd be about a week for a parks crew to help go and clear some underbrush near the dam, and then really just coordination as the project moves along. So man hours.
So no additional cost above and beyond that? Are we going to be responsible for renting and doing other, I mean, there going to be any other additional costs for you?
No, the agreement is written that if we have control over something, or if there's a way to partner, they're allowed to use our equipment. We can do that, obviously, just to try to get the project done as quickly as possible and save the state money. But no, other than once it's completed and the maintenance is turned over to us, no, anticipating any additional costs.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Want to propose one?
Well, it's really more of a comment. The only reason I'm at this point, I guess, for the removal of the dam is because it's been sold to us that it's a safety issue. We're building a brand new bridge. We're spending millions of dollars on this bridge. If this dam gives way, you're obviously going to have a flood. Wash out the supports of the bridge. Now you just ruined a perfectly good brand new bridge. And I understand that, and I buy that, and that's why I'm okay with removing it from there. However, I have a problem with the state saying it's an emergency. It's a public safety, not an emergency, but it's a public safety issue, unless we run out of money.
Right.
If we run out of money, it's really not that big of a public safety issue. It might flood, it might not flood, your bridge will probably be okay. So, I mean, which one is it? Is the dam an endangerment to the new bridge? It's going to cost the taxpayers millions of dollars if it's damaged? Because then I'm all for removing it, because I don't want to ruin a perfectly new bridge. But if it's not, then leave it in. So, I mean, that's just where I have a frustration and a problem with the state of Illinois. It's a danger unless they run out of money. Then don't worry about it. It's not a danger. You can leave the dam in.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, because the IDNR said if it's not completed, it's just going to revert back to its original state, and there's not going to be a problem. Why? If it's such a danger, why would they even state that? So the new bridge.
Sure. I'm not aware that they've actually.
And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Mark. I'm talking because I know you talk to the state, and that's the issue.
Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but they have not characterized it to me as an imminent danger, where they need to close off the surrounding area, we need to be looking at flood prevention and YDSD. I don't know that they've characterized that, or that they even know that the dam is necessarily failing. Just given the age of it, it's potentially suspect construction stage at the time, although it has been there for 170 plus years. And there's property downstream, very expensive property, public property that we put in. I think that was kind of the justification for removing it. So you never know when it's going to go. They've got money budgeted in the state for dam removal. This is probably one of the better candidates compared to other places. And, that's what they said.
I just have one other quick question. I know we were talking about, you might know the answer to this now, attachments number 2 and 3, which are substantial, having to do with taxpayers' property rights along the creek, and that the city didn't post, or no, those weren't posted, that there's some rights changing with the property along that dam removal. Is that anything we looked into? Is there anything that had to be posted that we or somebody had responsibility for?
So I'm happy to take a look at that.
Yeah, I'd like to know if there was somebody had to have a notification of their rights changing or their property being altered or something with that area.
Yes, Rose.
Back when the state was, we conducted meetings to save the Pownell Dam, and the state was on a big crusade to get rid of all the dams. That was their goal. Let's get rid of all the dams. I guess it was a maintenance issue with them and everything else. And the majority, they did hold a public hearing, and the majority of the people that attended were trying to save the dam. And the state representative, one man just stood up and raised his hand, and he said, why don't we just remove it? Well, that got the ball rolling. the state just jumped on that one, did everything they could to try to get the dam removed. And then we had a very sharp engineer that came up with the design of the four-step system. And it was just remarkable how the state kind of put a big turn on the necessity of removing that dam. And now we have the dam, the four-step chute, we've got canoe chutes, we have everything there. So my question would be, is the state just trying to pull the wool over our eyes again? Or do we really, really need to remove this dam? And I agree with Alderman Colissimo. If it is a public safety issue, then remove it. We don't want to put the new bridge in harm's way. But if it's just the state following their goal, then I think we should just leave it as it is.
Just to comment on that, Alderman Spears, and to comment on what Bart said as well, it's not, to my knowledge, they have not stated that it's a safety issue now. But I think there is some recognition that this structure is 170 years old. The construction of that dam, as I understand it, is not very conventional, meaning the Palmer Dam is a concrete structure with reinforcing on the inside. To be able to assess the long-term structural integrity of the dam is difficult. It's limestone, it's placed, it could be stable or it might not be. And to be certain that it's going to continue to be there for the next 50 or 100 years is difficult to say. So from not really being able to structurally evaluate it fully should provide some level of concern or level of risk to the city, YBSD, and the folks in that area. Another reason to consider removing it to take away that risk is the environmental benefits of taking the dam out. Right now, that dam keeps all macro, microinvertebrate, fish, etc. from migrating from the Fox River up into Blackberry Creek. If that dam was removed, there will be that opportunity for fish migration farther to the north or up into that watershed, which would certainly be a positive for the watershed. It will also improve the water quality, having a more free-flowing stream there than an impoundment that's going back through that particular area.
Yeah, I share fondness for the dam too. My boy got his first smallmouth just downstream of the dam. And I like the dam, but just think what we'd have on our hands if we replaced that bridge. And a year, 2, 3 years later, the dam failed. They were having to try to help us. As far as the contract, the availability of funds for us, I mean, you think that in our contract is bad, you ought to see some federal contracts. Not only availability of funds, but you don't have old termination clauses.
I hate buying into a broken system here. That's all. If it's broken, don't play the game and make that broken system work. You know,
Yes.
I know there's a Mark Johnson in the audience would like to speak.
I don't know if I can. I just
Sure.
would like to just add a little bit in this George's comment about the property owners. I know of at least 3 property owners. Their surveys date back a long time that say something along the line that it's the center of the Blackberry Creek as it meanders through the, whatever, And I tried to get a hold of all 3 of them. I did get a hold of one, Rich Speckman, who's got the property actually right at the corner of River and King. His property goes right down to the dam or the mill race, whatever. And he said he's had a lot of conversations with the city and whatever, but nothing. He has heard nothing about the dam, and he was surprised it was going to be on the agenda tonight. And I said, well, why don't you come on down? He says, I can't. But, so I think that because that could have an effect on what land they own, depending on what they do, or who has rights to adjusting their land. So I'm not sure of the final design, but someone needs to talk to the landowners on the east side.
Yeah, and would that be IDNR's responsibility or something we can reach out to? Or?
They haven't even started really, phase 1 of this. This is kind of the first step. So I would assume the land acquisition or property rights would have to be
design and everything else, contact the property owners and we see, to make sure they're aware of what's going on, and if they're not willing to cooperate, doesn't that change everything?
I wouldn't as a city staff member, as an IDNR staff member, maybe.
Well, you have to have your design before you can tell them what. So she can.
Preliminary designs out on the website of the city. That's where I got it.
Yeah, they want
But I mean, an engineering design too. You're talking detail. So, but I have to.
But this definitely shows their property being affected. That's what I can just.
I made a note of that, and we will address it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, at this point, I make the motion to table this until February 14th.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Spears.
Aye.
Colosimo.
Aye.
Bunkhauser.
Aye.
Wilczewski.
Aye.
Teelings. Gilson.
Aye.
Cut.
Aye.
Okay, next is the Works Committee report. Okay.
Motion to approve the letter of understanding between the United States of Yorkville and IDA regarding proposed widening of Route 34 and authorize the mayor to execute.
Second?
Second.
Comments, questions? Go ahead.
This particular item went into Public Works Committee, and there was a lot of discussion about this item. And the reason why it's back out here was because we're bringing it back out to discuss. But there's some things inside this, and we talk about broken system and about what these letters of understanding, what the state wants from us, what we don't get back from them. This is a prime example of a broken system. When you've got a state who's got a project that does not have funding for this project in their 5-year budget through 2017, and they haven't committed to it through their budgeting process, nor have they committed to the funding for it, yet they're asking for a formal letter of understanding, asking for us to commit to these funds to the total of $230,200 now. I think that's a broken system. I don't see why this council, or any other council for that matter, in any other city, would look at a letter of understanding like this and to commit to a project that not only has IDOT not committed to, they haven't found the money to fund this project, and Yorkville being one that's been stung, that's made commitments before, has gone back and asked for revisions, and the state's stung us for wanting to revise. It's my opinion that we should say no to this letter of understanding. And that was the discussion that went on the Public Works Committee, and that's the discussion before us tonight.
Sir?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just a couple of quick questions for staff. If we don't approve this letter of understanding, are we not sending a message to the state that we do not want this to happen? And wouldn't they interpret it that way?
Yes.
Okay, second question. Once again, we have a trail in this proposal. I'm reading this correctly, that trail's on the north side of 34th. I'm pretty certain that's where the location is. Do we have potential for recapture of those funds from future commercial development?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, to a point where it might be a significant percentage of what we owe?
It could be, yeah. If you have a frontage, let's say, west of Olive Creek, actually there's a commercial parcel there. When that commercial parcel develops, they would be required to put in a trail there. So it is something that we could ask them to basically reimburse us
system either, but it's the way they play the game, and if we don't want to play, then we're not going to get things done. My concern, of course, is putting this off, big expenditure to a future council. On the other hand, if we don't plan ahead, nothing's going to happen in our town. And I also feel if the economy doesn't rebound, they're probably not going to widen the road anyway. So this is going to keep getting pushed off into the future. I think we all saw how long it took for Route 47 to get widened. And here you have the state thinking about doing 34. I think we'd be foolish to pass this up, especially in light of the fact we are going to get some money from future development to pay for some of this. So I'm going to support it.
Alderman Spears?
I agree with Alderman Gilson. I wouldn't support this because of what they did to us before when we tried to change engineering or change anything in the plans. We were going to be penalized, so we basically had to go their way. And if they currently don't have us in their 5-year plan, then I don't think we should plan to be working with them. And also as far as getting rebates from future developers, commercial, whatever, the way the direction the city is going right now is we probably would waive that just to get the businesses in or the developments in. I think I can just foresee us, the city saying, that's okay, we won't have to pay for the trails. We've already got it in our budget, although we don't have the money to put there. So I am going to vote against this.
Anyone else want to vote on it?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest concern I have with this is just kicking an obligation of $230,000 to a council of 2017. Some of us might be here, some of us might not be here. That's the problem that I see with these budgeting requests from the state. If we have the money and it's useful and they want to widen 34, then that's great. But we don't know our 2013 budget. We're starting to work on that now, and we're asking to commit $230,000 in 2017. So I'm just not willing to do it at this point.
It's unfortunate, and I agree with your sentiment, but it's unfortunate we had to commit to this so far in advance. But that's the way it is with IDOT. If you want them to come here and do a $27.5 million road project. Vote no on this does not send a message to Springfield. All it does is ensure that Route 34 is going to be 4 lanes in Oswego and Plano and 2 lanes through Yorkville. Only one you're hurting is your residents.
Yeah, $230,000 to push it off it's an uncertainty. We don't know what we're looking at. We're just now getting into our 5-year budget to look into 2017. The 20% and some of these are even 100% local costs that we're looking at. It's tough to look at and understand how can we actually fit this into our budget. But like the mayor said, the other side is if we don't do it, we may never get that. That's what happened on Route 47. This is the kind of thing, we know we want the improvement, we just don't have the funding mechanism in place and we can't guarantee it's in place. Their request for a letter of commitment is pretty difficult to swallow. It'd be much easier if we could do yes, we want this, we'll move forward, but we may have to cut some things at the end. This one doesn't give us any numbers as to what we can look at if we're having to do changes in the future because that's where we got stung in previous times of making changes. I'd like to say I'm in favor of moving forward with this so that we can see the improvements happening in town. But I do have a little reservation about our costs, not knowing where our budget is.
Now, the city council had previously approved the design for this, right, for phase 1 engineering? Is that true? And what was that, Jeff?
When was that?
Do you have any idea?
I wasn't here when phase 1 was going on for 34. But
More than a couple of years ago.
They're ultimately going to hurt your residents anyway, and I'll tell you why. Because if you look at this projected budget that we're going to look at tonight, and you look after your 2013 and through 2017, this budget was atrocious. And what's going to happen is ultimately we're going to end up taxing and that the burden is going to fall on the residents for all this, exactly what Mr. Colosimo said, all this debt that we keep throwing on the future administration that we're not going to be able to pay for is eventually going to come out of somebody's pocket, and that's going to come out of our residents' pocket. So ultimately, you're going to hurt the residents anyway. If you can't afford it, don't spend it. And frankly, IDOT says they're not sure if they can afford it, so they're not going to commit to it. We shouldn't commit to it either. And if anybody read this budget and read past 2013, if these projections, these projections are dismal, and to vote for this and keep throwing debt out of that 2014, 15, 16, 17, somebody's going to pay, and it's going to be our residents.
If I can address the point that Alderman Funkhauser made, the sole purpose of this letter, basically for them to be able to come back to us 10 years from now when they decide to do this, if we want to pull items out and say, you committed to this prior, it was clear, it was understood, there was city council direction, and we're fine with taking sidewalks, trails, lighting out, but you're going to pay a proportion cost of it, and please don't argue with this because the paperwork is clear. Which is not necessarily the issue that we got into with our first conversation we had on Article 7. Paperwork was there, obviously, but it was clear. So that's the whole reason behind all of these, is that they figured out that we're a bit of a flight risk, and they're asking us to commit early so that they know how much it'll cost in the future. One point that we haven't really discussed, and Mr. Green actually brought it up in the staff meeting this afternoon, is it would probably be cheaper for us to say that we want something in and then pull it out at the last second to engineer something out than it would be to say no to something and then to add it in later. So if that's at all a metric of your conversation, it's a lot easier to engineer something out than it is to engineer something in.
Just to follow up on that point, we're at phase 2. So they're doing the detailed plans for the project, which are hundreds and hundreds of pages of improvements. And they need to understand or put on those plans, if we're going to do it, a trail or call out the street light improvements or whatever it may be. If the trail is not going to be there, then the grading in the right-of-way is different, and the plans need to be completed in that different way. So again, if we say yes, then they're going to put the trail in, and they're going to engineer around that as well as the other items that are here. When it gets to a point where they're actually ready to go to construction and they start talking about the intergovernmental agreement to say, okay, now we know what the numbers specifically are, just like happened with Route 47, they'll come back and they'll say, we've got the trail on the plans and we've got these and that, and then the council will have to make a decision. Do we keep it in and move forward? Do we have the money to pay for it, or do we take it out? And if you take it out, it's going to be a certain cost. If you decide now and say, engineer it without the trails, and 5 years from now, or 2017, or whatever it may be, we have the money, we want to put the trails in because we think that's a good part of this project, then it's going to be more to do that. Because now you've got to re-engineer it and you're adding design rather than deleting.
But the real concern is, though, Jeff, is at that point when we either A, don't have the funding, our portion of the funding, or B, we have to change a design based on our funding level. What are they going to penalize us for? We don't know. We didn't know what they were going to do the first time around. And, to make us commit to a crystal ball through 2017 when they can't even commit to it themselves is ludicrous.
Well, and I think it's just, George, related to, it's a $27 million project, and, obviously there's a lot of projects throughout the state where they're trying to get money, whether it be transportation or otherwise, and it just takes the process to get through those phases time before they can program in that money, and they just need to make decisions at points to say, our best guess at this point is we want to proceed with these type of elements in the project so that we can complete the plan. In or out, it's your choice.
Roll call, please.
Spears.
Nay.
Colosimo.
Nay.
Funkhauser.
Aye.
Wilczewski. Teeling. Gilson.
Nay.
Cut.
Aye.
It's what do you vote resolution?
Aye. You said I do?
Yes.
Aye.
Using majority
Economic Development Committee report. Oh, Marvin's not here.
Motion to approve an ordinance approving rezoning to the R2D duplex two-family residence district and variances for the property located at 312 Walton Street, Queenston property, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute. Real quick on this one. I'm sorry, second.
Second.
There you go.
Real quick on this went to Plan Commission. They made a favorable recommendation on this property, this request. After that, it went into the zoning board of appeals. They made a negative recommendation to the council. Theirs was actually unanimous on this piece. Then it came into the economic development committee for review. No recommendation was made to the council since this is a supermajority is needed on this. Here it is. We did not make a recommendation because we figured that there would be a better discussion here instead of recommending that it's just a committee. We wanted this to come out to the council for full discussion.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, I'd like to ask the petitioner if he would like to come up and say anything. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Robert Clayson. I'm living at 312 Walter Street. I've been trying to get this rezoning passed, and been running into a lot more problems than I really thought I would. When I bought this piece of property at 312 Walter Street in 1999, the first thing I noticed was that it was on a street full of duplexes. My intention at the time of buying it was to attempt to eventually make it into a duplex. I did not think for a second that it would be this big of a problem, seeing as how when I stand at my front door and I look out the street, I can see 6 duplexes and only 3 single-family homes. So I don't think that I'm really looking at changing this community. I'm not changing the dimensions of the street. They say the dimensions of my property aren't accommodating with the variances. Although if you look at the posters that they've shown here, none of these duplexes on my street meet the variance. None of them. We're right here. We have duplexes. This is my house. I have a duplex here, 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 and right next to me here. These are the ones I can see from my street. None of those properties have the variances. And just to comment on what the gentleman said earlier, I'm 200% below, but so is everybody else. I just don't see why I shouldn't be allowed to do what my neighbors are doing. Maybe the variances should be looked at. It's been brought up to my attention that the variances throughout a lot of Yorkville don't match. They don't meet their criteria. So why are those variances there if the majority of the town doesn't match it anyway? I sent out 48 letters, sending it out to my residences within 500 feet. One person come back with a complaint, Mr. Gabor. He then lobbied my neighbors to get a couple other people to not be promoting it. I see 48 letters sent out and 3 people being against. I don't see a big demand saying that they are against my proposed changes. Just to touch on the sizing, if you're going to deny me, I would just like to know why. I don't really see why really good reasons have been brought up to me. I'm a homeowner. I pay my mortgage. I'm going to pay over $250,000 for this piece of property by the time I make all my payments into my mortgage company. I don't see why I shouldn't be allowed to do with my property the same thing all my neighbors are doing with my property. I'm not changing the dimensions or the dynamic of the street or the area of that whole southern part of Yorkville is rental property. Mixed in with single family, a lot of the streets around there have other duplexes on it. I don't have a whole lot else to say that hasn't already been in your notes that I talked about. I would just like to know if I'm going to get voted down, I'd just like to know why. I don't have a
I don't have any questions, I have comments. I walk down that street, I live right in that area. The other residents that you're talking about, they didn't take a single-family home and make them duplexes. They were built as duplexes. And I've gone by, and it's obvious that 312 Walter Street was built as a single-family home. And in the meeting, I just didn't get the concept. I grew up in a duplex. I'm all for duplexes. We're not replanting this property either. So the duplex I grew up with, and I'm sure these are the same, you can sell half of it. I don't get this concept that this is a piece of property, from what I understand, is not being replanted. So if he wants to sell half of it, how are you going to sell half of it? They're keeping it as one lot. So that is, in my mind, a true duplex. I guess it's kind of going back to what Mr. Skinner said, it's like a two-flat or rental income, like an old house management. So I personally, I don't support it. I just don't get it. Compared to the other houses, they were built as duplexes. They're two separate units. This, if you walk by it, it is a single-family home and not a very good one. So I don't support it.
Well, yeah. First, I was at the meeting with ZBA. Are you converting the garage space or not?
No, my design has the garage, a single garage for each unit.
Because that was one of my concerns too with the parking. You have a very small driveway, and if you're going to have a certain number of people, I believe, how many bedrooms are in unit one and how many bedrooms?
3 bedrooms in each unit. Each unit does have its own garage, and there is room for 2 cars behind the garages. So there'll be room for 3 cars off of the street on that property. And then there's obviously room in front of my house that wouldn't even need to be used, but right now, it is allowed to be parked there. So yeah, I have 3 cars per unit off the street, 1 car for each bedroom.
My biggest concern was, and I have received calls from residents of Wall Street, this being my board, obviously. The only person that I heard is for it is yourself, Mr. Place, and everybody who's called me is against it. But besides the resident input, which is not my determining factor whether people want it or not, I just don't think that the argument of the duplexes on your street holds water. These homes, when they were built, they did conform to the ordinance at the time. It's not like we gave variances to this home. And I'm not a fan of spot zoning. I'm not a fan of providing variances. If we pass an ordinance that says we want lots to be so big and lots to have so much frontage and things like that, to have a certain amount of width, a certain amount of length, if we grant this request, then why don't we grant every other request? And looking at the property, I've been in the neighborhood looking at that lot. I agree with Jackie. This is clearly a single-family home that's going to be remade into 2 units. It's really not a true duplex. You can't sell it. You can't replat it. I would strongly encourage this council to vote no and accept the ZBA's unanimous recommendation.
Just to reiterate Jack's point, this area of this neighborhood was done as single family and duplexes when it was originally platted. Those homes were built that way as either duplex or single family. This is a conversion. That's a primary difference in this neighborhood. One of the other issues that there is the ZBA did find no reason, based on their legal findings of fact, 5 points that they have to review, they did not find anything that support this. There is no difference between this that creates this as being a unusual property that would not apply to other surrounding properties. This is a typical piece that could apply to any other property which does not hold water in the findings of fact for the zoning board's decision. Therefore, this does hold a lot of weight that they unanimously voted against this. I will not support this. I do not think this is an appropriate change of zoning, and that's where I stand.
Anyone else?
I also sat through the ZBA hearing from Alderman Forcimo. I also listened to the objections of people on my ward about this. I feel the ZBA's unanimous decision not to support this or to deny this is spot on. So I won't be supporting this.
Anyone else?
Those houses were built as duplexes.
Okay, Vice President, thank you. Got your answer?
My answer.
Roll call, please.
Spears,
Nay.
Colosimo,
Nay.
Funkhauser,
Nay.
Wilczewski,
Nay.
Teeling, Gilson,
Nay.
Pat.
Nay.
Okay, we're, next on the agenda is Public Safety Committee report, no report, no Administration Committee report, Park Tour. I will entertain a motion to approve participation in the TIPS tax property purchasing system, to purchase a tennis court lighting system for the Rank Creek Park B tennis courts. So,
Second.
questions, comments on TIPS tax? Anyone like Laura to explain it, or was you memo enough, or?
I have a question. How long has the firm been in business, and did the city obtain any list of references?
Laura, can you give a little background on it too? Because I mean, I didn't know what TIPS tax was. Maybe just a brief.
Sure. First to start, Range Creek Park B is the south side with putting in tennis courts, lighted tennis courts, and it's with an Osland grant. The lights that we would prefer to choose for that site are manufactured by Musco. They did do the lights out at Bridge Park, which is our baseball fields, the three that we have out there. And David Musco, who's representative, is here, so he can speak about the history of the company a little bit later. The cooperative purchasing program allows us to purchase the lights through this company instead of going and bidding out the project where we would have to go and have a contractor markup and a distributor markup to get the lights from the company. Through this program, we eliminate those two markups, and we're actually getting the lights from the company, but it's through a bid process. So we're not eliminating the bid process, we just have to participate in this program, and it's still going to be a fair bid. I don't know if that helps, or...
Yeah, that's fine. Would the gentleman like to respond to Alderman Streeter's questions?
Good evening. David Miller with Musco Sports Lighting, 1150 Alice Road, West Chicago, Illinois. And actually, I live in Musco. Program TIPS and tax has been around since 2002. It started in Texas with local agreements down there. It's expanded throughout the different states and been around the state of Illinois for 100 years. So it's relatively close to what U.S. Communities is. We did get looking through it. With U.S. Communities, I would have to go through a wholesaler, which would add a markup on that, plus go through a contractor, so there would be double markups. Or this streamlines the bid process, and then buy it direct.
There's no fee for the program, correct?
Correct. The fee is actually through me 2% of what our materials price is.
And it's your commission, but there's no membership fee. You should join correct.
Any other comments, questions? Roll call, please.
Colosimo,
Aye.
Funkhauser,
Aye.
Wilczewski,
Aye.
Teeling, Gilson,
Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
Spears.
Aye.
Next, I will entertain a motion to approve a resolution approving a revised vendors in the park policy and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute.
So,
Second.
Comments, questions on the revised policy?
I think I asked this last time, I just want to verify on page 3, on the yearly permit fees and the day permit fees. How much have those gone up versus the previous policy?
14 years ago, the policy was $200, and it's remained $200 since. So they did take into consideration the comments from the last city council. Our board took those comments into consideration, and they did keep the nonprofit fee for any park except for Town Square or Riverfront at $200, and then if it's for profit, they did raise it $100. And you can see it's an approach that Town Square Park nonprofit would be $300, for profit would be $400, and then Riverfront was kept at the recommended prices from the previous draft. However, for all parks, which is Town Square, Riverfront, and Remmenschneider, or any other parks such as that, they still felt it was a good idea to have it at $700 for nonprofit and $1,000 because you're getting the benefit of moving to any park throughout the city to be able to then.
And before that, more of not the parks like Remmenschneider or what were the cost of vendors?
$200.
So what from 200 to 700 to 1,000?
No, if they just wanted to be at one park, it would be $300. So if they just wanted to vend at Remmenschneider, it would have gone from $200 to $300.
Okay. I just struggle with this. I think it's a bad economy. I think it's a bad time. I realize these fees were put into play many years ago, but I just feel it's a bad time to be raising fees on businesses that are having a hard time trying to make it, whether that be businesses out there or here, as far as not-for-profit or vendors in the park. I just think we should leave it alone. Let them make money. I think we're doing okay. It's not going to, we're not going to have a negative impact. We were used to getting those fees previously. I just think we should leave them the way it is. I hate raising fees on small guys, and usually generally they are. They're very small, one or two people operations that are wanting to sell things in our property. So I just struggle with it.
Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Teelig.
Aye.
Gilson.
Nay.
Cott.
Aye.
Spears.
Nay.
Colosimo.
Aye.
Funkhauser.
Aye.
Wilczewski.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve a resolution approving a revised park rental and use policy and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute. So moved.
Second.
Comments or questions on the revised park rental policy? There are no small changes, that's right? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make sure that this is the way it was supposed to be back on page 13. When you go to category A and category B, the prices are exactly the same. There's absolutely no difference between the 20 prices under A and 20 prices under B. Is that the way it's supposed to be? And if so, why did you set up a category? Can you just point that out? I guess maybe point out the obvious.
Can someone tell me what page it is digitally?
Page 13. Oh, digitally it's 301.
I think the categories are just for priorities. How you prioritize.
Oh, is that how they do it?
The different, you mean the different categories and why they're
I
divided
know
up?
category A and category B. If you look at the prices for all categories under those two, they're identical. There's no difference between A and B.
I think it's just to give the different descriptions for, a category A is government and nonprofit and private groups and individuals who are 80% City of Yorkville. They're giving them the same benefit. So I think it's just to show that they're giving those different groups that same price, whether you're majority City of Yorkville residents or you're a government agency within the United States.
And are these categories in order of precedence? So if category A applies and category C applies for the exact same permit, A gets it? Is that how it is? Okay. Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Gilson.
Aye.
Cott.
Aye.
Spears. Aye. Colosimo.
Aye.
Funkhauser.
Aye.
Wilczewski.
Aye.
Teelig.
Aye.
Do we have planning commission? Nothing?
No.
Nothing for ZBA, city council report, city clerk's report, city treasurer's report, community and liaison report. Hey, yes, Mr. Funkhauser.
Just real quick, last night's school board meeting, relatively quick meeting for once. They went through their planning program. It's their 5-year plan. They did show their projections, what they were looking at for the next several years. Their forecast is relatively good for them, looking at the raises, increases, quite a significant amount of expenditures that they have. They're increasing, but their overall program looks like they're doing pretty well. It's good to see school board taking these numbers to heart and actually considering some of these items pretty heavily. Then also on the 18th, the Recreation Committee for Facility Alternatives met. That was the first meeting, kind of a kickoff meeting. Very good input. We're still moving forward. On the 30th, we have another meeting, and we will be discussing a little more in depth on some of the alternatives for what Plan B will be if the city should choose not to purchase the rec center. And that would be it.
Okay, I have one quick one. Last week I did attend the Metro West Council of Government Legislative Breakfast. The breakfast they hold every year. I was attended by State Representatives Keith Farnham, Michael Fortner, Kay Hatcher, Robert Pritchard, Timothy Schmitz, and State Senators Linda Holmes, Christine Johnson, and Chris Lawson. Three main topics of conversation were protecting municipal revenues, continuing public safety pension reform, and supporting e-commerce sales tax collection. Suffice it to say that our elected officials on the state level vary a little differently on their answers, but all three of them basically supported all three initiatives. After the breakfast, they did present me with a certificate for our city administrator. Metro West Council of Government gratefully acknowledges the outstanding contributions of Bart Olson as Kendall County Municipal Representative 2010-2011. There you go. And that is all that I have. Do we have any staff reports? No report. Okay, then we will go on to... Oh.
Just wanted to let everyone know, since the last city council meeting, we've had positive responses from the buyers and builder community about the build program. We do have a link on the website now about the information, and I think it's going to be a pretty good program. And any indication is coming in from the comments we've been receiving so far.
And I must commend Ms. Laura Schwar, our resident artist, and the logo for the build program. Did everyone see the logo for the build program? It is very cool. The B is made out of bricks. The U looks like a plumbing fixture. The I is a screwdriver. L is a T-square.
It's a L, yeah.
L squared.
Yeah.
And the D. Part of it. And the D is a leaning hard head. So it's very cool. It's only about page 6 look at it. Thank you for the update. Any other staff reports? Okay, we will go on to our fiscal year 2013 budget presentation. Olson, you want to just go over how we're going to roll out the budget and what we're going to cover tonight?
Joe, back here's our build logo on the city's website, so I didn't get a chance to see it.
No, it doesn't.
So as the mayor alluded to, we're going to do things a little bit differently than we did last year for our budget rollout. So anybody read the budget narrative, we're actually a month ahead of where we were last year, which I believe is about a month ahead of where we were the prior year. I wouldn't necessarily bet that we'll be here in December of next year because of the holidays, but we'll see. This is budget presentation number 1. The intent of this is going to be really to roll out the budget, explain, get clarifications, and really set up essentially 2 months of city council debate and discussion, open-ended on the actual budget itself. So we're planning to do this over 3 presentations at the city council. The current plan is to do them all at the end of the meeting. That way, if you don't want to sit through the budget discussion or the budget presentation, you can get through the rest of the city council business and then leave. So we are planning on doing one tonight and the next 2 in February. And then obviously a mandated public hearing. We do that every year. We're planning on doing it right now on March 13th of 2012. If you manage to get through the entire budget in the next meeting, for some reason, we might push it up. Optimistic, yes. To give you a timeline, our end date is April 30th, 2012. That's when we have to have the budget approved. And we better be at the county clerk's office recording it either that night or the next morning. So tonight's schedule, we're going to go through some of the lesser-known budget funds. No general fund, no capital fund. Get through TIPs, SSAs, our capital funds, and special revenue funds, debt service, and the library. So some of these are one-page budgets, some of them are one-line budgets, but they're all pretty easy. I'm not going to do a budget introduction. There's 4 links right there, and when we post this on the website after the meeting, I'll hyperlink them. That way, if you download the presentation, you can go straight to them. 2 of those links will take you to the actual PDF document itself. 2 of them will take you to the overall page so you can navigate through. I included probably a 5 or 6 page budget narrative included in that memo. So if you're really interested in getting a broad view of what we're doing, read that, and then you know close to be talking for 15 or 20 minutes. So let's start right into it. Let's do tax increment financing funds. These are single purpose funds. Your only source of revenue in these, or at least your primary, is property tax increments. So we have 3 of them right now. Fox Industrial, which will be closed next year, which we'll talk about, Countryside TIF, and the downtown TIF. So all the expenses in each one of those funds have to be in furtherance of the redevelopment plan, as Kathy can opine and explain further if you want. So Fox Industrial TIF Fund, this one is fairly easy. Page 59 for those of you looking at the budget document. If you get a second to get there. This one is easy because it's not going to exist next year. So we are including it in the budget, as we will every line item in the budget if there's been any expense or revenue in the past 3 fiscal years. So this one, we actually closed out by ordinance earlier this year. We're transferring money out of it this current year to make a bond payment in another fund, and it's not going to exist next year. So relatively simple. Before I get too much farther, there's a cover page with every fund, and then a detail page behind it. The cover page categorizes all of your sections of expenses and revenues here, taxes, investment earnings, for every budget. So when you go to the next 2 pages afterwards, there will be subheaders that you can see to see what is behind that individual calculation. Countryside TIF Fund is the next one. Talked about this a little bit in the memo itself. There's not really a whole lot going on with this fund because there's not a whole lot going on with development, which is going to be a policy decision for the city council in the next few years in the future. We've got a 5-year budget here. Again, we're going to be talking about fiscal year 13 this year solely, or that's at least what we have to approve. Each year, we're gaining just over 4,500, or just under, actually last year, in incremental property taxes. And each year, we're making a $300,000 bond payment. So it's not necessarily an issue from a cash flow or budgeting standpoint right now because we sold the bond. We have bond proceeds sitting in a bank account, and we're making those debt service payments each year with those bonds. So it is something that is going to will eventually be upside down on. Off the chart, if there was a fiscal year 18 and 19, you'd see 2 more debt service payments, and you'd be in a negative fund balance for fiscal year 19. So that's our event horizon there. I believe the bond itself is actually through 2024, if I remember correctly. So at some point in the future, if nothing happens with the development, we'll be making bond proceeds probably out of our general fund or through property taxes. Or refinancing, yes. You can always refinance, stretch it out over a longer term. You always could, seek a developer out, give them incentive to build. There are bond proceeds obviously still there, and then hope that property tax increment will offset the bond payment. Downtown TIF fund. In here, your main expense is going to be Route 47 costs, which are included in the capital outlay section right there. Your current increment each year is $70,000. That's without inflation or new projects. So we know that we have Folly Cedar downtown. We know that we have Cobblestone. Hopefully many more in the years to come. So hopefully these property taxes will go up, not through our doing, through actual private investment in the area. That's reflected in the detail on the next page. So you've got Route 47 costs, project costs, which are just anything in the downtown for a city building that needs to be done. HVAC system, you need a new door, a new window, in a riverfront building. We can use TIF funds for that. Administrative fees and legal services, which are Kathy's fees to negotiate with developers in the downtown, and just report costs. And then the property taxes are on top. SSA funds are the next one. This is probably our first real discussion of policy issues that we're going to have in the future. Essentially, the city is the homeowners association for these two subdivisions here. So we manage all the maintenance, we bid it out, we get to decide, really without their input, other than through the general election, what gets done and how much we're going to charge residents for it. So in looking at us as a homeowners association management company, you've got property taxes each year, which are your annual HOA dues, and then you've got your contractual expenses for each subdivision. So here we've got Fox Hill. Fox Hill is a healthy fund balance right now. $16,000. The yearly budget right now is only $4,500. There are some long-term maintenance costs that we didn't actually show in the budget because we still need to discuss them for sealing the trail, for repainting the monument sign, and then re-landscaping the entranceway. That will need to be done eventually and could cause this expense to spike. Again, the revenues on this side, we did show a 10% increase each year, so that would manifest itself in us sending basically a property tax that's 10% higher for each resident there. So it'd be like your annual dues and your homeowners association increasing 10%. Again, that's a policy decision for the city council each year. Same for the Sunflower SSA fund. The only difference with this fund is that it's a lot less well-funded. It still has a $10,000 fund balance going into fiscal year 13. But basically that's 1 year's worth of expenses. Your contractual services right now, your expenses are $9,900, and your property taxes each year this year will be $7,500. That's only going to cover your cost for the prior year. In Sunflower, you've got more variable expenses in that you've got 3 ponds and a lot more common area. So one of the things that we're going to recommend doing is actually doing a study on when the pond will need to be dredged and how much it's going to cost. And then at that point, we have a conversation with the residents and the city council as to if we want to do that, and if we do, when we want to do it, and how much we want to pay for it. So, but again, we're anticipating this one, it's definitely needed more so, a 10% increase each year going forward to be able to establish a reserve to do those things. All right, on to our capital funds and special revenue funds. Most of these funds, your main source of revenue is going to be impact fees. Public Works, impact fees, library impact fees, police gets an impact fee, engineering, parks and recreation, land cash, etc. Out of all these funds, there's a secondary source of revenue. It's going to be from restricted to specific expenses. So motor fuel tax, there's a couple different motor fuel tax disbursements that the city gives us. Again, they can only be spent on things in that fund itself. So land cash impact fees can only be spent on land cash items. And then expenses, they have to be permanent in nature. So here's our municipal building fund. This one's really easy. You've got licenses and permits up in your revenue, which represents your $5,500 municipal building impact fee that just got reduced to $1,700. Other developments in the city is $150. So this represents the amount of money we think we're going to get each year. No expenses out of this fund because we're not proposing to do anything. However, there is a negative fund balance because we built City Hall with this fund, and so it's sitting in a negative fund balance. didn't have enough impact fees at the time to do it, so the general fund is basically lending that fund some money. Parks and Recreation Capital Fund, similar story here. You've got impact fees, obviously, up to licenses, permits, some investment earnings. They're in a separate bank account, so we do charge or we give interest to this particular fund. There are some expenses in this fund in fiscal year 13 and 14. This is the detail for this fund, actually just fiscal year 13. You've got Rain Street Park, and you've got some equipment. We're proposing to purchase a mower for Bristol Bay. That will allow us to cut 65 acres in a fraction of the time that it takes to do it now. So, and Rain Tree Park, we accepted money years ago from the Lennar developer to complete certain improvements. So we've taken the money in, and now we're spending it several years later. Police Capital Fund, this is going to pay for your police cars, your weather warning siren fees, etc. They do have a fund balance right now of about $135,000, and that's including the money that we spent this year on the weather warning siren fees, or weather warning sirens. We've got one police car per year going forward for each of the next 5 years. This is the detail for that fund. So you can see that in the equipment vehicles. The one thing that's a little bit different than what's actually going to occur is our fiscal year 12 projected line item. This line item right here for vehicles is actually projected and shown at $20,000. This correctly. Illustrator out. That one right there is going to be closer to $60,000. They did sell some used cars and seized cars this year, and are proposing, I think, at next week's Public Safety Committee meeting, to purchase 2 more squad cars. So the City Council approves that. That projected column is going to be a little bit different. So over time, they do have a little bit of a fund balance, obviously, where if you said we prefer to accelerate the purchase of squad cars, you do have a little bit of money to do that. It would be a good idea in the long run. You'd save money on repair costs. Obviously, you'd have less downtime. It's just whether or not you think you can afford to get it. Public Works Capital Fund, again, you've got impact fees coming in. I'm going to go straight to the detail here. You've got a debt service payment for Wolf Street building. That's our self-storage building that we bought a few years ago. We're making about $100,000 in payments on that each year. And because your impact fees are so minimal right now, this fund is going to go into negative. Actually, it already is. And that's just something that you have to be mindful of going forward. Motor Fuel Tax Fund. Again, we'll get into the detail on this one. You've got your general motor fuel taxes up here all the way at the top. $415,000 per year, essentially. Right below that, you've got high growth. We are still in a high growth area, especially compared to other areas. And so we get some additional disbursements from the state for road projects. The big debate, and hopefully it turns into a non-debate, is our salt budget right here at about $230,000 per year. If we don't spend that in fiscal year 12, way over here, or right next to it, you can use that for whatever you want this year or the next year. So you've got 230 now. We only spend 150 of it. We might be able to store some at the county, save us some money next year, and then you can actually increase your patching budget, hopefully, for the next few years. We do have $50,000 just in patching, similar to what we did in Game Farm Road, for the next 2 fiscal years going forward. So that is in addition to. That's in addition to cold patch and hot patch, which is just going to be done as the weather freezes and thaws over the winter. So you still do have some money set aside for that each year. Land cash fund. Again, get into the detail. All of these expenses and most of the revenues are going to be tied to grant projects that we've either already accepted and been awarded, or we're still waiting on. Prairie Meadows, we actually got in a reimbursement for that in the past month. So that was years in progress, so we were glad to see that come in for $400,000. Rain Tree we're expecting to get next year because that project will be completed next year, as long as the state keeps up their reimbursement timeline. And then some random fees from Autumn Creek and Blackberry Woods. That's, again, based on them pulling permits in the subdivision. The expenses, Raintree Village, we're going to finish the park in fiscal year 12. And then we've got Hopkins Park, which is a recreational trail program grant, which we'll only spend money if we get that grant. And then Riverfront Park is an outside grant spread over 2 years here. Again, if we get it, then we'll choose to accept it or not, and then spend the money accordingly. The only two in here that are large ticket items that are not related to grant reimbursements are going to be Grand Reserve Park A and Park B. Park A is in the Kelly's part of the Grand Reserve subdivision, so all the way in the north. Park B is right next to the Combat Eastman and railroad tracks, just south of Mill Road. So we've got a kitty corner from Bridge Park. Both of these parks we accepted as land donations in a previous outside grant application. So the requirement in those previous grant applications was that we build out the park at our cost at a certain amount of time, which is a good deal because we didn't have to donate anything at the time we accepted it. So we do have a budget in there of about $140,000 for Park B in fiscal year 15, which is the deadline, and then fiscal year 16, $50,000 for Park A. So if we decided that we didn't think that we wanted to spend that amount of money, you might be able to tweak Park B. We already tweaked Park A once to downsize our plans. So that's something that the park board may want to relook at in a few years from now if we don't have the money done. Debt service fund, these are simple bond payments, and the revenues are all going to be from property taxes resulting from non-abatements, which we discuss every December, January, and February for the next few years, or just through a general fund transfer. So right into the detail again, you've got 3 bond payments next year. One of them is your in-town road program, which is 2004C, which is done next year, which is good. 2005A is your in-town road program phase 2 that we did a few years ago. That one carries forward, I believe it ends in 2023, if I remember correctly. And then your 2002 bond, all the way here at the bottom, that's your Fox Industrial TIF bond. We just transferred around to the TIF budget. That way we can close it down because that TIF isn't going to exist. And we're going to pay for it out of this budget here this year. Final one, your library funds. We did put in a 5-year budget for them. They have not reviewed it. They have 3 budgets: operations, their debt service for their building, and then their capital costs, which are their impact fees. We have absolutely no discretion over this, but we provided it to them anyway, just so they could use it as a planning tool. The one thing we did show that was a bit of an editorial on our part was we did include $25,000 property tax increases each year, which is somewhere, depending on growth, above their PTEL limit, but below their maximum rate that they think they can set by law, or that they can set by law. So that would be through negotiation with them each budget year, I'm assuming. So here's the operations fund. In general, the good thing with them is they went through, they made a lot of cuts last year. So they are maintaining their expenses. The revenues are coming in online too. So they are actually expecting to increase their fund balance this year. And then if we give them $25,000 each year, after that, if they don't change any of their expense patterns, they'll grow their fund balance. So which then allows them to make the policy decision of whether they want to expand hours or services or to decrease property taxes. We'll skip through this. Here's the debt service fund again. Your payment right here represents 2 bonds for the building construction that were approved by a referendum. And then your capital fund here, your licenses and permits are going to be impact fees, and then the outlay, the expense side is just for expenses that can be used for those impact fees. That wraps up tonight's presentation, unless anybody has any clarification questions. Again, we do plan on doing the next one on February 14th, so happy Valentine's Day to everybody. The water and sewer budgets are going to be discussed, and we are proposing to discuss the Parks and Recreation Operating Fund and the Rec Center.
Any questions, clarifications right now?
Mayor, when are we going to discuss all this in detail? Is this the appropriate time to do that, or are we going to do it in a separate meeting?
Yeah, I think the way we talked about doing it was doing these presentations all the way through the public hearing, March 13th, That would be the first night we can have open-ended discussions. March 13th, second meeting in March, and both meetings in April. So I think there'll be plenty of time. I just thought this would be a better way to do it, over 4 meetings and spend one whole Saturday, which I never thought was that productive anyway. But yeah, we'll roll it on over the next 2 meetings, and we got 2 months to discuss it. Okay then, additional business. I do have one item. We did have a train derailment yesterday, just west of River's Edge subdivision. It was kind of a mess. I'm a little disappointed with Illinois Rail, not that they did not notify the city at all. I learned about it on Facebook, you know, and residents calling the city. So what I would like Bart, the staff to do, you or someone else, to contact RailNet. I want them to know that their number one priority better be the safety of our citizens. And I would like to know if they have a plan in place if Poplar Road is ever blocked. I know, Larry, that was one of your concerns when that subdivision was platted.
Absolutely. Is it possible, Mr. Mayor, to get a report, not only on the most recent one, but the one we had, what was it, a year ago?
About a year and a half ago.
If there's an issue here with the tracks being safe or whatever, I think we need to have that information in front of us. And if we haven't requested it, I'd like to see us do so.
I concur. We need to know what's going on with them. If there is if the trains are going a little bit faster, which I think they are, if that's one of the causes of the accident, or if those tracks are unstable, we need to know. So.
Can I add to that too? My parents also live in that subdivision. We talked to them about it, and they said they were sitting in the house and heard the horrific noise and looked at each other wondering what was going on, and nobody said anything, and they saw these trucks coming. We should at least, after we get those reports, have the immediate notification of the residents. So they were worried about what happened. Nobody knew.
My wife heard it, and I was watching TV. She goes, "You hear that? Boy, it sounds like a train went out." You're crazy. And sure enough, I can call her and say, "Honey, you're right."
Do we review our emergency management plan every year here? Or, when was the last time we reviewed that, do you know? Can we get that on the public safety agenda for the next meeting? Bring in the plan to look at it? The blockage of Poplar Road there obviously is going to be a big issue. So, thankfully there was nothing that was dangerous in these trains, but there's plenty of trains that carry plenty of bad stuff. So we'll just put it on public safety for next time. Thank you.
Any other additional business? Alrighty then. No executive session then. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Funkhauser?
Aye.
Krzyzewski?
Aye.
Teeling? Gilson?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Spears? Pelosi?
Aye.
See you, Bill.